Very often what's holding you back in your organization from achieving your fullest potential isn't tech debt, isn't market conditions, isn't talent shortage, but it's the fact that you've got thinking that limits what you can actually do. If you've never seen what's possible, you just might be thinking that the rate you're operating at today is normal. That's the best you can hope for. But in fact, once you've seen better, you can achieve that again. You can aim at it. If you don't know it's possible, it's often so much harder to aim at reaching there. In this video, I want to reset your bar, help you understand what's possible, what you should be aiming for, where you can go if you understand what the real limits are, and hopefully make you get there faster. That's the topic of this week's video. And if you're new here, hi, I'm Aviv Ben-Yosef. I'm a tech executive coach and consultant. I help people just like you create teams worth leading because life's too short to lead mediocre teams. And a big part of that is realizing that your team is mediocre, that you can move faster, that you have more to look forward to if you just realize what's possible and a lot of the times really within reach. Let's talk about that. And if you're interested in this topic, by the way, in about a week, I'm holding a free live session about this and more. It's called the new non-negotiables of tech leadership in 2026. And it's aimed at making sure you start 2026 already set up for success. It's free. If you sign up, you're going to get the recording. Link and all the details are in the video description. And now let's reset your bar. Many leaders have the wrong assumption that they're moving fast enough, or they're doing everything that's possible, or that they're doing okay because they've never seen better. And it's a lot harder to imagine what could be if you've never seen what is someplace else. You're operating essentially based on where you happen to be in the first few spots in your career that really shaped your standards. They really shaped what you think is possible. I had the good fortune of working with some really incredible people very early in my career, which in a way kind of skewed me to think that everyone should be amazing teams. And I understand that not everyone can be at the top 1, 2, 3%. But I do think that reaching something that's way above average is a lot easier if we just know what we should be doing, if we can just imagine what sort of changes we can do. And in this video, I'm going to cover a few real life examples, some case studies from clients I've worked with to ensure that you get a sense of what the bar could really be. And if we, by talking for a few minutes, can help you reach a bar that's a bit higher up, you're gonna get your money's worth out of this video, that's for sure, because it's free, but also you're gonna create a team that you're proud of. And by doing this again and again, in a way that's iterative, you're going to create a team that with time is going to be amazing. And a big part of that is realizing that with time, we're not talking about years into the future, we're talking about what's possible very quickly. And let's talk about it right now. Let's start with example number one, the Stuck Reorg. I was working with a VP of engineering in a unicorn who was stuck on a reorg he clearly had to do. It was clear to him. He has been working on it for 6 months. For 6 months, it was still stuck right between his ears. He hasn't talked to anyone about it. He hasn't made any real steps. He was stuck in perfection, not realizing how to move forward. And when we start working together, it was clear to me from the get-go that this was a big thing that he had to get done because it was sort of a prerequisite for a lot of other changes we wanted to do, and we had to get moving. I asked him, okay, what's the timeline? How long do you think you need to do this? What are we talking about? He looked at the fact that it's been 6 months and nothing has moved. He looked forward and thought about the 100, 150 or so people who had to be affected and thought about, okay, this would probably require 2-3 months to execute the reorg, and we need a few more months to think about it. So I'm assuming another 6 months. I listened to that and I said, no way in hell this needs to take you 6 months. Yet you are a unicorn. We're not talking about a startup where everyone's sitting in the same room, and still we're not talking Oracle. And look at all of the Fortune 50 companies that had to make huge changes over the past couple of years, and I don't think that they waited 6 months to get it executed. You definitely do not need to do that. So I did an expectation reset. I told them, no, this is something that you can do much, much faster. You don't need to wait for all of those things. You can make this a priority and move much faster, and remove a bunch of the assumptions you have about the time that's needed in between and about how complicated things are. And once we had this reset of expectations, once I told him, nothing stops this from being done a month from today, he all of a sudden realized that it was possible. It was almost as if by saying the words, I made it possible for him. I made it possible for him to imagine such a future. And then within a couple of weeks, which were intense, but a couple of weeks where we had defined the criteria for success for this reorg, what we wanted to achieve, who needs to be involved, what we want to change, how we would measure the success of this thing, involving the key people, the key leaders who would be affected, and running with the team, with the management team, to define what are our options. Here's what we think about doing. Here are the people who might be at risk, etc. Within a couple of weeks, we had that. It was a Google Doc with a few pages where things were laid out, and that was clear. And once we had that, moving from that plan to execution, having this be in place in the entire team, after those 2 weeks, it required, I'm not remembering correctly, something between 4 and 6 more weeks. Okay, so we're talking about unclogging in a month and a half, something that has stood still for 6 months. By doing that, it also created this new bar for the entire company, because people saw how quickly it was possible to move. It made future changes much cheaper because we reduced a lot of the fear about having to change things, about how static people really are, about the cost of doing a mistake here. Because if we're making a mistake and it's going to take us a couple of years to redo things, that's terrible. But if we can fix things within a few weeks, then it means that any change is not that grand and we can just start moving forward. By doing that, we just unlocked new capabilities and a new rhythm of doing things at the managerial and leadership level of the company, in a way that has made that company continue to march on faster than ever for years after doing that. Now we're about 3-4 years later. Company is doing terrific. It has gone through another major reorg as it has kept growing, and this time it was a lot simpler and faster, even though the organization has become much bigger with time. That tells you that once we reset our expectations, we can move much faster, and your takeaway is to realize that you cannot let perfection hold you still. That VPE, as good and incredible as he is in his work and has an amazing track record, was stuck there with that perfection mindset. He thought it had to be perfect. He thought it's not possible to move these things faster. And once we made it unstick in his mind and realized that that's not a requirement, we could move so much faster, and so can you. Next, let's talk about a CTO reset. I was working with a VP of R&D who, after years in the company, was ready to step up to be a real CTO in the company. The problem was that he, after all of these years, had this sort of glass ceiling. He could not imagine himself doing things that were outside of his older roles and being solely technical. And so was the way that he was being viewed by the CEO and the other founders. And that made it a lot harder for him to become that CTO. He has been in that process of CTOing for months at the point where I started working with them. But once we started working, and I heard that, and I told him, look, you're a brilliant fellow, you learn so fast, you're eager, you can understand the business, it's not something that's outside of your capabilities. Looking at all that together, what I'm hearing is that you should be able to CTO up in this company, because it's not a huge company. We're not talking about taking control of a huge unicorn after moving from a small startup. We're talking about something that's organically and has been happening. For you to make that transition, we're talking about a few weeks, a couple of months, nothing major. And yeah, you still have a lot to learn along the way, but you should be able to take the reins off that role and start moving forward. Once I said that and told him that I've seen it in my experience happen, and I made it clear to him that it's, again, a possibility within reach, maybe a stretch goal, maybe tough, but still possible and not insane. Once I told him that, he sort of got this wave of energy and started rushing forward. We started talking about what he could be doing, and literally within a couple of weeks, he has already shifted from being someone solely focused on the tech part to having regular one-on-ones with the CEO, talking about the strategy, taking time in the between meetings to read up on the strategy, read up on the roadmap, write a bunch of questions, start moving forward with all different things that he had. I'm talking about moving upstream here. I have different videos about it and I'll link to them. But he started executing on that. Within a couple of weeks, the CEO already said, wow, I'm seeing the change here. I can feel that the CTO is now really operating at the executive level of the company. The CEO was happy, and that change within a couple of weeks has already given him enough trust and confidence in deciding to move forward with this. And the CTO was able to CTO himself so quickly that he just gained so much momentum and kept running for months. Like for months, whenever I talked to him, I was like, wow, every time we speak, you're just so much further along than you were the last time. He kept working. He came up with innovation that's relevant and not just cool technically, but things that actually connected to possible business solutions that the clients would want. He operated with his peers in the company, in marketing and in sales, in a way that enabled many things that people never gave attention to because there was a disconnect. Marketing said stuff, sales said stuff. The CTO engineering group just waited to be fed by product what to do. But once there was an executive there who was part of the executive team and started working together with the other execs in the company, we saw things move so much faster. So again, this was a glass ceiling. That person that had a bar of what a tech executive can do, because that's like the examples he had in the past. And once I told him, no, let's shatter that glass ceiling. You can move so much faster. You can be involved in this and that. You don't have to just be the geek doing the tech stuff. Once we had that cleared out of the way, he was able to move so fast and get there in a way that made everyone around much, much, much faster and satisfied. And again, you can do that as well. Sometimes identity is velocity. Once you realize that you don't have to be stuck and you can unclog and think about yourself as someone that moves fast and you don't have these self-imposed barriers and limitations, and you start thinking about what I want to do and how I'm going to do it and how I'm going to get there, you're going to get there. Maybe not as fast as possible, but much faster than you had imagined before. And doing that is something that I personally think you owe to yourself and to your organization. Next example is about sponges. I've worked with so many sponges who are these leaders who soak up execution and tasks and just get to it. They are the people who initially were amazing executors when it came to the business, day to day, the things the company needed to do. And they were amazing there. And once we talked and I told them, that amazing execution skill that you've got, and this is something that I've done a lot of times, I see that you're great at executing. How about we take that executing that's purely focused on tech and product work right now and start putting the same execution skills you've got on like second order things about the processes, about the company, about coaching, about how you yourself are growing, and let's try that. And once I made it clear to them that if they had the execution muscle and was already so developed, it's just about turning and using the same muscle somewhere else. The soft skills can be improved much faster than you're used to if you're good at executing, if you have the ability of being accountable to yourself and in making sure that nothing falls between the cracks, etc. So once I told them that was possible, and once we started talking about how they can move forward, started putting action items, putting dates, estimates, how long do you think, what's the next step, what's holding you back. Once we start doing this, these people became the sponges. Whatever amount of personal growth I was able to throw at them, they just took it all in and immediately started executing. Every time we get to the next sitting, the next session, and already everything was done. They had moved so much faster. They kept growing. It's a bit, I talk sometimes about this concept of a pressure cooker, because you can wait for things to happen at regular atmospheric pressure, or you can use a pressure cooker and see how things happen so much faster with less temperature, because we can create a different atmosphere that makes things move much faster. The same is here. Once you realize that you can move faster, that your experience doesn't have to just move by regular wall clock time. I can learn faster. I don't have to wait 3 years to get there. I can start putting in the reps, start working on myself, start executing, improving, getting feedback. I can get there much faster. 3 years become 3 months sometimes. And that's a change, a shift that once you understand, you can move so much faster and unshackled by the burden of your previous thinking. Your takeaway is to understand that you, as a leader, set organizational speed limits. Once you realize that you can fly forward, a lot of the times your organization will start moving with you. You just need to stop thinking about regular time that it would take you to execute on this, on that, and the fact that things move slowly, because a lot of the times we focus our execution on the product and we don't do the same when it comes to our real product, which is our teams and organizations. And once you realize that, you can get there much faster. And our last case study for today is about the startup reset. I was working with a company that actually was comprised from a team that was acquired in the past in a past startup. They had seen success together, and now a few years later, about 50% of the team was from that original startup. So they had a core that already knew how to work together, had seen success together. They thought it was just a matter of doing the same stuff again and seeing success yet again. And yet, when I started working with them, it was clear to me that they were not working as fast as they could. They were stuck in their habits of a few years ago, whereas now things could have been done so much faster because we've changed our habits as engineering teams. And in the meantime, we've learned how to work even faster together. But they had that bar set at where they had success a few years earlier and sort of had imagined that that's what we need to do again and it's going to be fine. I was like, no, we can do even better. Why not get there? It doesn't require all that much of a bigger effort. It actually might turn out to be less of an effort, because once we finish the growing phase, we're going to have things go much smoother from here on. And what we did is that we sat down and I was reviewing their processes and how they were operating, and they had things that were just too cumbersome. Things were designed too slowly and too meticulously for a startup of their size. I'm like, okay, how can we move faster here? How can we strip things down to the bare bones? How can we ensure that every single person here is aligned on the business impact and remove the fluff, essentially? Because I told them, your bar is set at what you remember right before your previous exit. And that's a stage where, first of all, it's a few years ago, so things have changed, but also it's a different stage from the stage you're at right now. And you need to reset yourself and set a bar that allows you to move much quicker and ensure that everyone is fully aligned on the business, because you're not that big. They only had a few dozen people in engineering. That doesn't require all that much of an effort to ensure that people are aligned with the business. You don't have to have all of these levels of separation. So what we did, I sat down with the VP of Product, VP of Engineering, the CEO, we sat together and we thought about how can we strip this down to the bare essentials to ensure that whatever we're doing is just focused on the business and on goals to be achieved. We created a structure that was a lot simpler than what they had before, where teams were, instead of big functional teams. We created smaller cross-functional teams that each had a business goal, a business target to move, and that made it so much easier for product to understand what they had to give those teams. Those teams had things be so much clearer because they saw the needle. They knew whether they were making it move or not, and they were able to start moving faster. And this was like magic within a couple of iterations, nothing more than that. So we're talking about a month. I remember just, I was doing a fly on the wall sort of scenario there, and I was eavesdropping on meetings here and there. And I remember hearing the VP of product saying at the kickoff of the third sprint, something to the lines of, oh my God, I don't think you guys are registering that we're now moving 2 to 3 times faster than we were a month or 2 ago. That big of a change happened not because they installed AI coding agents, because that was like a year before those, but it was because they were now unshackled. They realized that they don't have to move so slowly, have everything be like signed again, 2 and 3 times, have to work in those structures where there are so many handoffs. I sat with them and we started from the ground, from scratch, and said, if the team could now move, would now have to move 10 times faster, what would it look like? And we didn't aim at 10 times faster, but we did aim at quite a bit faster. And by looking at that, starting from the get-go in a way that didn't have all those burdens of the past, they could start moving so much faster in a way that just might have saved the company. I'm waiting a year or 2 more to see what happened, but I'm certain that had we not made that change, the company would have already closed shop by now. And the takeaway for you here is to realize that a lot of org drag is self-inflicted. It's us thinking that things have to be a certain way, without realizing that actually it can be a lot different, that we are the weights weighing ourselves down. And all this to say, I hope that these case studies have helped prime your brain to notice where you're doing things where you can push the bar higher and where you can start moving faster. Because even if you think you're moving as fast as possible and you're doing things well, if you've never witnessed anything better, it just might not be possible for you to realize that. And today with these 4 case studies, all real, all from companies that are in all sorts of stages, each one of them can apply to you and maybe will help you spot exactly this case or others similar enough that you can start moving faster. And by doing that, you're going to create a team you're proud of. Life's too short to waste it leading mediocre teams. I really believe it. It's not just something that I say at the beginning of the videos. It's something that it's a bit of like my raison d'etre. It's why I start the video. It's why I do what I do. I care about this. I hate seeing brilliant people waste their lives because we're not utilizing them to their fullest potential. Life is just too damn short. That's it for this video. Thank you. I'm reminding you to check in the video description my free upcoming live stream, the new non-negotiables of tech leadership in 2026, including a lot of what we talked about today, but so much more awesomeness. And if you sign up, you're going to get the recording no matter if you can attend, and also my other goodies there. If you like this, like and subscribe, so you're going to get the next one next week. Ciao.